What is up, YouTube? We are back to go ahead and completely disassemble this iPhone 5. You can see that the back housing is bent here. We're going to go ahead and put a new rear housing on it, and that means that every single piece must come out of this iPhone 5. Now, as a disclaimer, this is the first time that I've ever done this, so it's probably taking a little bit more time than maybe some other videos. And as you know, I don't like to fast forward to my videos, so you can see truly what it would be like to disassemble this the first time. I'm going to be using a suction cup to help remove the screen. We have a couple of different pry tools. We have this iSesamo case opener. We have a couple plastic guitar picks, and possibly, if needed be, some plastic razor blades. So in a sort of array of opening tools and pry tools as well. We've got a flat spudger here. We have a curved spudger. Usually works a little better to get the battery started out of these phones. We have a dental pick to help pry up any ribbon cables or glued down components within the iPhone. And then we have our 3 screwdriver types. We have our pentalobe to take out the screws in the bottom of the iPhone. You'll need a small Phillips screwdriver, and also a thin, small flat to help pull off a couple standoff screws that are on the interior of the motherboard as well. Let's go ahead and get started. We're going to remove the SIM card slot here just real quick. Any sharp tool can help you get this done. Push pin, or if you do have your SIM eject tool, that'll work as well. Using our pentalobe screwdriver, we're going to go ahead and undo the 2 screws on the bottom of this phone. Alright, both screws are out. The next thing we need to do is go ahead and remove the screen assembly off of this. And to do this, we're going to use a combination. I like to use a suction cup. You can just use a pry tool. I don't want to scratch it, and I apparently just turned the phone on, unfortunately, so we'll have to wait for it to boot and try to turn it off here in just a few seconds. Now, I like to use a suction cup to help pull the screen up. You can just use a pry tool and slide it underneath the bottom portion here and pry it up, but I don't want to scratch or damage the LCD since it's in complete working order. So normally if you can get a good start on it with a suction tool, and then start with your case opener tool, just like this, I did the guitar pick, that'll get us started on what we're looking to do. Now that we've got it started, we can go ahead and, I'm just going to power this off here real quick. Now that we've got it started at the bottom, we can go ahead and take our suction cup tool off, and we'll go ahead and just continue to pry the screen up with our plastic opening tool, making sure that we don't damage the LCD, the white behind it. It does scratch if you put a lot of pressure onto it. Now you don't want to slam this thing open. Take it nice and slow, open it to a 90-degree angle. We do have a few connectors in here still. We have our screen connectors up here at the top, which we don't want to rip off. That's the key concern here. And we do have our battery connected down here as well. So we'll be needing our small Phillips head screwdriver to go ahead and remove these screws out of the case. A lot of people say take out the battery first. I don't think it's a gigantic concern. I've undone a lot of phones and don't always take out the battery, but if you're concerned about any sort of shorting, you can go ahead and just disconnect the battery. So somebody's opened this phone before. Normally, there's a couple connectors or a shield plate here that you have to undo. 3 screws. But apparently somebody opened this phone before and took that out. Once we've removed the 3 connectors that hold the LCD down, we can go ahead and remove it. We'll go ahead and start undoing the battery. Undoing the middle screw and then the side screw first. We'll go ahead and use our dental pick here to pry the battery cover off. And our little shield will come off of the battery. We can go ahead and just set that aside. And then we can flip the battery connector. Just remove our last screw here to take off this other shield connector off the battery. Go ahead and set that aside as well. Perfect. Now, as we take this iPhone apart, it's important to be meticulous with your screws and where they're located at. Now, right here, I'm going to start prying the battery up. This spot where I'm at right here, by where it kind of has the CE, that's the best place to get started. It's got a nice opening on the side of the housing where you can get your pry tool in and start pulling up. Now, the trick is, you don't want to deform the battery too much. You want to give it kind of equal pressure all the way around. You don't want to pry against things that could be damaged, which is why I'm using a curved pry tool. I can stick it underneath and pry up with leverage without having to put it on any of the internal components within the iPhone itself. See, I'm just moving around, getting some space started between the battery here. You can see I can put my spudger in fairly deep here, and I'm starting to pry it up. We can go ahead and use our flat spudger, get a little bit further underneath and start using that to pry forward. Went ahead and removed our battery. Go ahead and try to take out any deformations that you put in when you're trying to pull it out. Be careful not to puncture the battery. That would be a definite concern for us here as well. Go ahead and put our flap down here that was used to pull out the battery. That does not work, and you'll just rip it off, so it's not worth using. Just use a pry tool. So we're going to go ahead and take everything out of this device. We're going to take off this upper connector here near the camera. Undo both screws. And like I was saying, be meticulous about keeping your screws and where they go. I have a magnetic mat that I write everything on where that comes out of this phone. I find that works best. You can just use a piece of paper to keep track. Alright, we moved our little shield connector. Next thing we're going to undo is the ribbon cable that we removed when we did taking the battery off. This connects the lower loudspeaker of the iPhone 5. It does have a little bit of adhesive that runs down the shield connector here on top, so just gently pry it off and pull it back towards the bottom of the phone. We have a ribbon cable just down here, a wire cable. We're going to go ahead and disconnect that wire cable. We do have two thinner ribbon cables that run the length of the phone that have the same wire connector as well. We're going to go ahead and just remove those off. There's one, and there's a second one that's a little bit longer just underneath it. So you can go ahead and just pry up underneath the connection point. It has the exact same connector as that thin black wire connector we did under at the bottom of the phone. Careful not to damage these. They can be a little bit tricky to get off. And that will reveal an additional screw off the logic board that we'll need to remove the logic board out of the phone. Alright, the next thing that we're going to do is take out the phillips screws that are holding the logic board down. Let's start with the upper one first. There is one in the lower portion here to the other side of the SIM slot tray. We'll go ahead and remove it as well. We're going to switch up for a thin flat screwdriver to undo the standoff screws. There's one down here at the bottom. You'll see that they're definitely round and they stick up larger than any other screw that's been put into the phone. Go ahead and remove it. There are a total of 3 of them here as well. Gonna undo our second one here just real fast. We have additional one here at the top of the phone. We'll go ahead and remove it. Now they will look like they'll allow a Phillips, but they are very shallow. So unless you have a very flat Phillips tool will not function properly to remove those screws. We're making great progress on our logic board. There are a couple screws up here at the top that hold this board in with a little ribbon cable. So make sure you remove these before you start pulling the board out. You definitely do not want to rip these. There's our first one. We'll be taking out the second one. We did a small Phillips head screws. Now to take the logic board out, be very gentle. There still is one connector on the underside of the board that is holding this in. It's going to pull our camera forward here. It's giving us a little bit of trouble. So as we flip this board over, we do have a wire connector on the underside, and our cable for the proximity sensor is getting stuck here, so we're just going to pry it out. It's been a little bit tricky. It looks like it's got a little bit of adhesive on it. So just working with that here real fast. Alright, now we flip the logic board over. We have a cable connector just right here on the underside. And undoing that will allow you to remove the logic board completely and go ahead and set it aside. We're going to go ahead and take out the vibration module by removing 3 screws. There's 2 that are on the top that are visible, and there's one that is on the interior upper portion of the housing unit. Tricks me, and I always seem to forget to take it out. I just realized that there's still an additional screw here, so go ahead and remove it. Now that module will freely remove. Go ahead and set it aside. You can see we have a few cables that are running through here, the volume, the mute switch, the power button cable. There's a wireless antenna cable here as well, which will need to be removed. We'll go ahead and take that out. Just using our pry tool, putting a little bit of a pressure underneath the side here and pulling it forward. It does have a little bit of adhesive holding it to the rear housing. Once you get it started, sometimes you can just pull it up with some medium force off it, but you definitely don't want to rip this cable, so be gentle as you pull forward and take your time as you pry it off the housing. I'm going to go ahead and remove the screw here that holds in the power, volume, and mute switch. We'll go ahead and remove those screws. Give us access to pull these cable out. Third screw is right here. We have an additional screw that's holding in the kind of where the proximity sensor is at. There's a little clip that's holding it down. So go ahead and remove both screws. There's an additional standoff screw, so we'll need to switch to our flathead screwdriver to pull that out. We're going to go ahead and just put our pry tool underneath the connector here. There's an additional screw that's holding the power button in. It's an odd little power button connector. It's on a hinge housing. Kind of like a door, so it'll swing open. Just going to peel it back just a little bit. And start to pry our cable up. Alright, removing the cable with the volume buttons first. There's our volume buttons, the positive and minus. There's some adhesive underneath the ribbon cable right here. Just going to go ahead and give it a little bit of pressure to go ahead and pry the cable off the back of the housing to remove the clip that's holding them down. It is also important to understand that the mute button goes over the volume switch when you reassemble the phone. It'll make it a little bit easier for you. These two metal housings and the way in which they are insert back into the phone. We're just going to go ahead and pry up this upper portion of the ribbon cable here, which connects to the vibration module of the phone. Go ahead and start to pry the ribbon cable back. Get our mute switch out of there. Got stuck on some tape, so that's fine. Alright. Now the power switch hinge is our next part. There's our mute button. Hinge can be a little bit tricky sometimes. Just going to toy with it for just a little bit so we can't get it to pull out. And one of the problems is the cable is still stuck into the slot, so the actual hinge door will not open. Normally the cables are not this hard to remove, but this little sensor area here is really stuck into the housing. So we're just going to try to pry it out here just a little bit. And that'll allow our hinge to open. There we go. Try to remove the hinge door with the power button intact would be ideal here. We don't want to mess with the adhesive on it too much. Our power button just came out. But the hinge can be tricky. Sometimes you can't get it to swing open far enough. So So we are going to remove the power button off of it. There we go. Our power button has been removed. I'm just going to go ahead and try to remove this door. There's a little black connector or phone piece there as well. We'll go ahead and just remove that. It was on the back of the hinge. Piece to the camera lens, which we don't need, that our new frame comes with. And still trying to just remove that hinge. This one seems to be tricky. Normally if you pour them towards the camera area, they should unconnect for you, but this one might have been bent in the rear housing when it was kind of messed with. We'll go ahead and start removing our bottom portion of the loudspeaker, and we'll deal with that hinge in just a few seconds. Undoing the screw in the bottom right hand corner first. There, our hinge finally came out. Next, we'll be removing the screw next to the lightning bolt charging port. And on the other side of the charging port is the next screw that we'll be removing. We're going to pull away this contact here for the home button. It does have a little bit of double-sided adhesive on it that holds it down into this portion of the charging port area. Try to loosen the loudspeaker portion here. There's an additional screw that we'll be removing off of that near that ribbon cable we just took off for the home button. And then 2 additional screws around the charging port. That should give us access to go ahead and lift the loudspeaker portion out. This loudspeaker is connected. Go ahead and just pull this ribbon cable forward that's adhesed to the bottom rear housing of the phone. Being nice and gentle as we pull forward. This will pull out the full charging port connector area of the phone. With an additional screw just right down here, we're going to remove. And just stick into the bottom where the 3.5mm jack goes in, so just be careful as you're removing it. There are a few washers that sit and kind of go right where the charging port goes back together. I'll show you where those are put back in the reassembly of this phone. Making great progress. We're almost finished with the disassembly of this iPhone 5. So what we need to do is take out every additional piece that our new housing does not have. So all the brackets that go down the sides that connect and snap the front assembly must come off. So we're going to remove all of the brackets off of the sides of the phone. So we're undoing the first, and we'll be undoing the second screw here. And that'll pull the bracket off. These will hold the LCD assembly in. As you reassemble, it'll clip back into place. We'll undo this third screw here. There'll be 4 screws on this side and then 4 screws on the opposite side. So 2 brackets that hold the LCD on. And we'll be doing the opposite side now, just removing the same retainer brackets for the LCD assembly. There's one more clip that holds us in with 2 screws. We'll go ahead and just remove that here real fast. We have our SIM slot tray eject portion. We'll go ahead and just remove that. It's a little swivel and a screw. And set that aside. Start comparing our 2 housings together to see what really needs to be removed from this. Checking out to see what this housing does not come with. So any of the speaker grate, the mesh at the bottom of the housing will need to be removed, as the new housing does not come with that. And it helps keep dust out of the interior of your phone. There'll be a piece on both sides of your device. Just removing that mesh grill at the bottom. It can be a little bit tricky. It might be easier to use a razor blade in this scenario because it is so thin, but also trying not to damage it. Break out the razor blade and see if that'll function better for us. Looks like it does. Alright, there's a little mesh piece. Just looking to see what else needs to come out of this housing. There's some housing around the charging port. We're going to remove the black housing. Any phone connectors on here you'd want to remove and put it into your new phone, as that'll help keep the insulation and the phone being grounded. Still trying to remove some charging port housing here. It's being a little bit tricky, so I'm going to use a thinner metal device this Disassembly tool, see if that'll do it for us. There we go. Need to make sure we always put the phone back together in the correct order. So make sure you ensure which side came out, whether the thin or the long side goes down towards the back of the housing or up towards the front of the housing. Looking at the top area, making sure all the screws are out, both sides. It's a little metal silver retaining clip here that holds the cable in that attaches your antenna. It also looks like it has some sort of a grounding prong on it as well, so we'll go ahead and make sure we remove that as well. Checking to see if there's any little pieces of metal tape here. There's a little foam piece here, so we're going to remove that. Make sure we transfer that into our new housing as well. Looking for any additional foam pieces that we could use and remove to put into our new phone. There's a metal foam pad here, which we'll go ahead and try to remove as well. Now, I know this video is a little bit longer, but the goal is that I want you guys to see exactly what it'd be like to disassemble a phone like this if you've never done one before. I've never changed the housing out on an iPhone 5. I've changed some screens, I've changed a power button, but never completely disassembling everything out of the phone. So if you're looking to do a housing change and this is your first time doing it, this would be a good video to watch just to see exactly how it's done. I will also show you the reassembly video, what I used to help reassemble the phone. Some 3M double-sided tape in some areas, possibly some additional pieces of glue. There's a sticky pad here we're going to remove here as well. That'll need to go into our new phone. Just double checking, it looks like that is it. Comparing the two housings together. We got everything out, and now the trickiest part would be putting everything back together the way that you found it. So again, if you like the video, go ahead and hit the like button. If you want to watch the reassembly video with the new housing to see exactly what I do, go ahead and hit the button in the bottom right hand corner. Thanks again for watching, you guys, and I will see you on my next video.